Will 2026's opening race be one of the most chaotic we've had in a very long time? Well, a lot has been said by the FIA, specifically Nicholas Tombazzi, and even going on to state to the Italian media, not all teams will be ready for the start of 2026, and hinted at that there will be a significant performance fluctuation between the beginning races. There have been also engineers being poached from other teams, like we just recently saw with Ferrari losing two very key engineers that were important and key members to the 2026 power unit going to Audi. And rumors are also being spread of certain teams actually lacking and not having the performance in 26, so engineers do not go to the team. There's still a lot more to develop with 26. I want to talk about specifically what Nicholas Tombazzi said because it doesn't necessarily mean exactly what he's saying. And some teams look to be ahead of the curve while others are pretty far behind as of right now. There's always plenty of rumors circulating around the start of a new regulation period, and I'm only taking it from the sources that I do trust pretty heavily. So with that said, we're almost at 90K. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe, would mean a lot. Let's get started with this 2026 video. Of course, the first thing we're going to go over, and really the title of this video, is how some teams will probably not be ready for 26. Now, if you've been watching the sport for a long time, honestly, this makes sense. It's been like that in every single regulation period. Even with 22 probably being the closest, we still had Williams and Aston Martin at that time in the back, about 2.5 seconds behind in quali and race pace. Now, funny enough, that gap sounds pretty big when you compare it to what we have currently in 25, but there were points in the 2014 season where there were 8 DNFs in that beginning race. Some of the cars were about 5 to 6 seconds off. So we've made big improvements, and of course he's going to state that, seeing as these teams turned in the real performance simulations in June. Now you have teams like Audi, who are making their own engine, new to Formula 1, have never competed, that will start off on the back foot, no matter what, it's just the reality of it. And same with the team like Cadillac. They did run their first simulation in Monza. Of course, they're not going to give us the results. It was probably P21 and P22, but they went over the pit stops, the strategy they should have gone for. It's nice to see that they're already taking these preparations and making the next steps before the car is actually on track. But the reality is, come 2026, if they're not backmarkers, that's a huge achievement. If they are, it's what was expected. Because you do need a significant amount of experience in Formula 1 to actually be competitive in it. Bottas and Perez are perfect for that situation, but when it comes to the engine department, working on the aero, that's all things that take time to get good at. But what's not said in these articles and what's not really talked about is the teams do not have to deliver their full performance in exactly where they're at. They can only give a sample size, which the FIA has to see that they're really going along with the regulations, because the data that the FIA received in June, there was a 20% performance gap between leading teams and the least advanced ones. Now, for context, that's about 20 seconds. I do not believe these teams are giving it in full. But how fast they actually are, we won't know till they hit the track. It's just the reality that there will be a significant performance fluctuation because of what I stated with Cadillac and Audi specifically, and probably Haas, and probably put Racing Bulls in there as well. Those are always the teams that are kind of settled towards the back. We have bigger expectations for Williams, Aston Martin. I'm going to talk about them right now. For Williams, they've been working on this 2026 project pretty much from the start of 25 whenever they were allowed to. Brought very little upgrades. It's a team that's expected to make a pretty big jump. I wouldn't put them as one of those teams that is expected to be towards the back. They have the Mercedes engine, which has been talked about as being the most dominant, the best engine. Even recently now, Dan Follows, who was one of the technical directors at Aston Martin, was fired recently. Didn't do a great job on the 24 car, did a great job on the 23, has stated that Mercedes has been doing a phenomenal job from what he's seen and expects them to be the dominant force in 26 at the start. Now, that is a pretty reliable source saying that, and teams like McLaren, Mercedes, Alpine, and then of course Williams will be running that same engine. But during this period where you could not upgrade the engine and only aero, clearly McLaren has been the superior, so don't ever count that team out. What's funny is there's actually been a rumor in the paddock talking about Ferrari and stating that their engine is much weaker than the competition. This rumor has been talked about for about 3 to 4 days, but before that, we saw that they were going for a very aggressive approach but the reliability was not there, which is typical Ferrari if you ask me. It was the same case in 2022, super strong engine, had to tone it down for reliability, was a very fast car in slow speed corners, but then on those straights, very heavy reliant engine tracks, the engine typically went kaboom. Now there have been news sources that have came out and said Toto Wolff has started these rumors, which I guess from his case is very smart. So the engineers from Mercedes are not going to Ferrari, because in the background there have been 2 engineers that went from Mercedes to Ferrari, even with Ferrari losing 2 to Audi. And this is probably going to be an ongoing battle between the team principals getting into the other team's heads. It's all part of the sport. Even Fernando Alonso recently talked about how he got Mark Webber in a race due to some wet conditions. So the team principals and everybody else in the team has their own way of playing those mind games to keep engineers at the team, and really their own way of boosting that performance. With Aston Martin, who's been recently quiet, Andy Cowell has came on and spoke about 2026, saying people are smiling at the results they are seeing. Adrian Newey given a great boost to the approach the team is taking, and people are enjoying their work. Now the best thing out of this is we aim to bring Aston Martin to the front of the grid. They've usually been pretty hesitant on saying that, but it seems like the simulations are going pretty well over there at the AMR team. I do know a little bit about Red Bull Ford, and I have heard a little bit of commotion on them struggling on the power unit, but this has been a common problem with every single team. And really in that electrical deployment, it's been very tricky to discover. Apparently Aston Martin has a different approach to the other teams. But there's so much news circulating around. There always will be till we end up getting to that first GP. And of course, some of these are rumors, others are from pretty well-known sources that probably have a good idea of what's happening on the inside. So don't take everything as fact. We still have to see these cars on track, of course. I'm never going to tell you guys this is just absolute fact and this is what's going to happen. But all of this is probably going to cause for a very chaotic Albert Park in 2026, which I think is something that's been needed. These cars are way too reliable with new engines. It's going to give us a lot to talk about. And it'll be super interesting to see the aero on these cars. But what are your thoughts on what Nicholas Tombazzi has been saying? He's been the most vocal out of all the FIA members on these real regulations, even speaking to the drivers, sometimes deflecting something they've been saying on the cars being slower. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Make sure you guys check out UnchainedMediaInc.com. Put in your predictions for the weekend. Thank you all for the love. Please leave a like, subscribe. It'd mean the world. And peace.